And we're back. Here I am, Fly Navarro with Fly Zone Fishing. I'm here with John Adams from American Custom Yachts.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Getting ready to put some props here. John, what is the overall process you guys go through?
Basically, we're trying to make everything as easy as we can on the guys. These are heavy props. We don't want them hurting themselves. We usually use a two-man team to do so. We like to take and make sure that the keyway is up at the top of the shaft. That way we don't have to fight it getting it put back on. They're going to go ahead and lift this and get the keyway lined up. Slide the shaft forward. You see it's not the lightest thing in the world. They get a lot bigger around here, and we also do small ones as well.
What that wheel right there, what is it, about a couple 100 pounds?
You're talking, yes, in excess of 200 pounds. So.
All right. And so now they're just wiggling it on to make sure the keyway stays in place.
Trying to line the keyway up. It is tight. We want them tight. We don't want them too loose. We don't want them too tight. So
explain to me, if the keyway is not aligned properly, what are some of the things that could happen?
You could have a key get key bound. You can push the key forward on the shaft. What it does is it inhibits the prop from going on the shaft all the way. So you want to make sure the key is in there. Most of the time you can push the key back and forth, but you don't want to have a lot of orbital movement in the keyway.
All right, and that's exactly what's making your propeller spin on the shaft.
It is, but it is not the deciding factor as to what's holding that wheel on. The wheel is tapered. It fits to a tapered shaft. That's where the bite is. The key is there for alignment purposes and to keep it from coming loose.
All right. Now, once you guys get it up on the keyway, then what's the next step?
Next step is they're going to sing it home. They're going to push it forward as hard as they can to try to get it sung onto it. You hear that thump? That's a good tapered fit. That's what we want to hear.
Perfect.
We're going to go ahead and throw on the first nut. There's also a jam nut will go on behind that, and then a cotter key to follow it up.
And explain to me, you got the first nut, that holds it into place?
Correct.
And then your jam key does what?
The jam nut holds that first nut from backing off the threads.
Okay, so they kind of work in unison to make sure that there's no issue.
Correct. Ideal situation is we'd use a prop smith to put this on. They're going to tighten that first nut just to make sure the prop's not going to fall off on them. They'll use a prop smith to install it. The prop smith is used by torque method. It will physically press it on in an even fashion.
Okay, perfect. So now you got the first nut already on there.
Yep.
Make sure it's snug.
They're happy with that. They'll back that nut off and install the prop smith now.
All right. And now the prop smith, exactly what is it? What do you do with the prop smith?
The prop smith is an ingenious design to help us get full pressure and even torque on the wheel so that it goes on smoothly and it goes on perpendicular to the shaft.
Okay. So make sure it goes on without any kind of torque in the wheel one side
Correct.
or the other.
Correct. It's far easier and better to do that than it is to try to use a giant wrench to tighten up these nuts. It doesn't work properly and don't always get the proper seating.
Now, I see all these blocks of wood. What exactly is the wood used for?
The wood is used so that they can physically stop the wheel from moving around while they're trying to take these big nuts off.
Now, is this something that can be done underwater?
It certainly can.
But not recommended?
Not recommended. We've done it several times. A lot of boat owners do it. If they have that prop smith, it makes it a heck of a lot easier to do.
All right, so they back the nut off all the way.
Now he's made sure and prepped the threads so that the threads are nice and clean. When we do the final install of the nuts, we use Loctite on the nuts. They don't necessarily like that underwater when they're trying to pull them off, but it is a much sure bet that they're going to stick.
Now, when you say you clean the threads, how do you guys clean the threads?
They'll take a wire brush, emery cloth, whatever it takes. They're not trying to distort the threads, just clean the corrosion out between it and whatever residue's left from the glue. Most of these props are drilled with their 3 holes in it, and that is for the prop smiths.
So the wheels are designed to have this prop smith to
Correct.
put it on?
Correct, in the hub.
Okay. And how many bolts are in this prop smith?
Well, there's 3 bolts that physically attach the prop smith to the prop, and then the prop smith itself is threaded. So it uses the thread taper as on the shaft itself as its fulcrum. So that's how it pushes things on and off.
Beautiful. And they're making sure everything's in a good position.
Correct. They'll use this prop smith to remove and install.
Keep rolling, guys. This doesn't just happen in a split second. So you're watching the whole process here.
This actually saves a tremendous amount of time with this prop smith. We're ensuring that the wheel is on the right way, and taking off these wheels, it is the key piece of equipment to use.
Now, a wheel like that, what are they making these wheels out of?
It's a nibral prop, bronze props. This one, I imagine, is all nibral.
Okay. And those nuts are those brass nuts?
Those are bronze nuts, yes.
Bronze nuts, okay.
Yep. Long time ago, we used to be able to use simple pullers that had a clamp and a screw through it, and we'd tighten them up from the end of the shaft to the face of the barrel on the wheel. The new wheels have so much DAR on them that you can't physically get that prop puller on there.
What is VAR?
DAR.
DAR.
It's diameter over range. It's the way that you can't physically put something straight between the beginning of a fluke of a wheel and then the next fluke that's there.
Okay. And it was just a clamp that would hold on and pop it off.
Correct. Correct. Once they get into these 5-blade wheels and stuff, it's a little more difficult to do.
Now your guys here, they seem like they've done this once or twice?
These guys are very good. They understand what they're doing. The method is always the same on these things. If you get a stuck wheel, even with a prop smith, they'll know to go ahead and get heat and apply the heat to the top of the wheel on the keyway to expand it a little bit enough to get it to pop off.
And when they're stuck like that, what's usually the problem? What causes?
Most of the time it's fitment. It's either fitment in the wheel itself going onto the taper or the keyway in the taper.
Okay. Now they get each individual bolt there and they tighten it up in there. What's the pattern that they use to tighten it up?
Pretty similar to the way you do a wheel on a car. You want to do a star pattern with it. They're not going to tighten up everything on one side. They'll move around to different degrees on that and make sure that they get it all even. Now this is the method for putting it on. The method for retrieving it off of there's 3 open holes on that. Those would have longer bolts that go into the hub of the wheel.
Okay.
The space between the physical threaded part and the other would be spread out, and then they pull on the wheel.
Okay.
We use a torque wrench in this. There's set values for the size of the bolts depending upon the size of the shaft and the size of the prop smith.
Okay. And you just tighten it up until you hear the click.
Tighten it up till you hear the click. They'll continue to go around. They'll be happy once they get the correct pounds on it. They'll start off at a lower value on the torque wrench and go incrementally up until they get to the proper spec for that torque wrench for it to have even pressure. Here are the clicks. We know we're starting that initial process of tightening that on.
Now, once you've done your full pattern and that wheel is up as far as it can go, then what do you guys do?
We'll remove the prop smith. We'll go ahead and start putting these nuts on in sequence.
Okay. Let's get a close look at how they tighten them up evenly. Now, John, once it's already up there to its appropriate pressure, what is the poundage that you guys like?
Well, luckily these prop smiths all come with their set values on them for the size of bolt that they have. So we can go ahead and take a look, and it says 55 pounds, so we'll make sure they're all at 55 before we take it back off.
All right, so now once you take it off, what's the next step?
Next step is to prepare the threads for the new nuts going back on, or used nuts as this is. And We'll go ahead and throw the first nut up there, make sure it's tight. We put Loctite on the threads, as I said, and then we'll put the secondary nut on and a cotter key to keep it safe.
Now explain to anybody that doesn't know exactly what is Loctite.
Loctite is a chemical bond that hardens to keep the threads as tight as they possibly can be. What this is most of the time we use heat to get these off because it makes it so tight on there. It fills a gap between the thread of the shaft and the thread of the nut, and it's an anaerobic, so it seals up and dries without air.
All right. So you make sure that the threads are nice and clean.
Yep. All threads are nice and clean. Try to get as much residue from the Loctite out of there as we can. There's also salt and corrosion in those. We like to make sure that they're all clean. Before they even put this wheel on, they were cleaning the threads, making sure that the nuts fit properly. We wouldn't end up with a problem later.
Again, it's always about having proper preparation beforehand.
Correct.
Before you need to use it or need to take it off.
You do enough of them, you learn where the accidents come in and where you end up having your problems. So these guys are pretty thorough. Now these, being that there isn't any real method of tightening these up without using a pipe wrench or a wrench of the proper size, they're going to use the blocks to block up against the wheel. That'll take up the counter pressure when they're tightening those nuts. Try to get as much of the fluke face as they can so that we don't warp or distort the propeller as we're doing this. And that's pretty much as much pressure as you can put on them. We try to get on to make sure they're on there secure. He's going to go ahead and secure this up with the jam nut now. Make sure that we get that on there as well.
And that's what's keeping that from backing off.
Correct. If by chance that the wheel is not properly seated, which we believe these are, it may creep forward. At least the nuts will stay in place. Do the same for the jam nut, and then we're ready for the cotter key, which is a safety device to keep the nuts from coming off the shaft if they become loose.
That's a monster cotter pin.
That's about the gist of putting on a wheel.
And that's it. Fold them back like 2 ears and
we're good.
Ready to go.
Yep.
All right, John, thank you very much.
Thank
Guys,
you.
Thanks for joining us in the Fly Zone.